What is up guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing here a return of the Magical Musketeers deck profile. So this is essentially a bring back of this old deck that was debuted about a month ago, and seeing it's being improved as I actually play along with this deck has definitely helped me better appreciate what this deck could potentially do. So with that being said, this deck is definitely going to be quite a bit different from the previous build, as I've actually implemented a few different cards inside it, as well as readapted my playstyle to better fit this particular style of play. And as you guys could already see, we are playing over here the Zarakhiel, which is a new addition to the deck that I think actually works out quite well for the deck, allowing it to not only be more pure, but also more refined as opposed to the previous build. But before I get started, I would like to remind you guys to drop a like, share, comment and subscribe, and hit the bell notification as well, as it really does help. But with that being said, let's begin. So starting off here, we have our one Zarakhiel. Obviously this card is the new addition to the deck, however I do believe that it should have been in the deck since the very beginning. It's a really good card, and I'm surprised to see that so many different decks out there don't actually utilize this card. I do actually believe this card is a very good card, and it's something that is definitely underrated. It's very easy to summon out by just tributing one of your Magical Musket monsters, and the thing is this deck, in the previous deck profile, I've proved it that this particular deck manages its resources so well, so to tribute one of your Magical Musketeers to summon out this is not necessarily the worst cost ever, because you're still definitely managing your resources, you have plenty to work with as a leftover, so bringing this out is definitely fantastic. Not to mention, to go for a 2500 beat stick is definitely more effective in this particular stead. But you must consider the fact that Zarakhiel is also a great card to recover your resources during the end phase. Based on how many cards you actually activated that turn, you could actually just get the same amount, which is definitely fantastic. Obviously it's via drawing, but even so, to draw additional cards into your hands, it means you could potentially have more Magical Musket spells and traps, as well as hand traps in addition to that. So surely playing one copy won't hurt. However, moving on, we're going to be playing here 3 copies of Caspar. It is still the very key card of the deck, as well as our 3 copies here of Starfire. Both cards are definitely very necessary for the deck. They work incredibly well. They are just really amazing. What I am bothered by is their levels, because Caspar is a level 3, Starfire is a level 4, and that's the only thing that I kind of have to nitpick about those 2 particular cards, but they are 2 of the most important cards of the deck, so I guess it's a little understandable there. But moving on, we are playing our 3 copies of Kid Brave, also one of the key cards of our deck. Not as much of a key card compared to Starfire and Caspar, but even so, this allows you to draw more cards as well, with the cost of you actually discarding a card as a response of that. So yeah, it's definitely quite fantastic there. Next, of course, we're playing here 2 copies of Doc, allowing you to recover some cards from the graveyard back to your hand. We have here the Calamity at 1, because it allows you to special summon from the grave, but there's not many cards actually in the grave to work off with, so 1 copy definitely is more than enough. And we're going to be playing 1 copy of Wild as well, again just not as applicable as the others, but by playing all of these here, we've pretty much played all or every single copy of the Magical Musketeer monsters available to us. To wrap things up with the monsters, we're going to be playing here 3 copies of Ash, a really exquisite card for actually stopping your opponent, slowing them down, and I think compared to every other hand trap out there, you are definitely going to be benefiting the most out of Ash. You can't really play Gamma because you have to depend on having an empty field, and that is very unlikely. You will always have at least 1 card on the field, and Ash is just so much better in this particular point. Now moving on to spell cards, you guys might be noticing a few things that are different. Firstly, we are still playing here the 3 copies of Cross Domination, but instead of playing 3 copies, I am playing only 1 copy now of Steady Hands. I realized Steady Hands just didn't work as effectively. Although it boosted up your monster's attacks, you have really weak monsters, so At best, you could dish out a good amount of damage, but you couldn't really get over a lot of the big monsters your opponent had. For example, if your opponent had a monster that was even 3000 attack, and that's pretty easy with Dragoons and all, then the Steady Hands doesn't really do too much, whereas the Cross Domination actually focuses on weakening the opponent's monsters by dropping it down to 0, effectively allowing you to gain the advantage there. We are still going to be playing here 2 copies of our Pot of Desires. Definitely still works incredibly for this deck, and I wouldn't change it in any other way. Now, for the new edition of this deck, I'm going to be playing here 3 copies of Ties of the Brethren. Definitely a really amazing card here. This card works wonders for this deck. This deck has light monsters. Well, all of them are light except for the Ash, of course. All of them are fiends except for Ash, and the majority of them have their own similar levels. So you either have level 3s or level 4s. By going with Ties of the Brethren, although you are technically sacrificing the special summons for the rest of the turn, you are definitely still benefiting off the actual summons of Ties of the Brethren with the cards you actually generate out, because you are meant to be responding to your opponent. This is the supposed weakness in this particular deck, that you can't actually do anything actively. You have to respond to everything your opponent does, and depending on what they actually have, you might be at a disadvantage. But the more Magical Musketeers that you actually have out on the field, and whichever spells you actually choose to activate in response, you could trigger off different kinds of effects based on what monsters you have on the board, meaning it gives you a bit more versatility, and it also speeds up different plays as well, getting out more cards onto the board as soon as possible. In fact, this card here turns 1 card into 3 cards. Definitely really amazing, and playing 3 copies does not hurt whatsoever. For the rest of the spells, we're going to be playing here the 1 Instant Fusion, the 1 Caught by the Grave, the 1 Monster Reborn, and I also dropped down Charge into a Dark World down to 1 copy. Because you have to discard card, I didn't want to play 2 copies of it anymore, so to mitigate that particular cost, we're going to drop it down to 1, but it definitely still helps out with the deck being an additional Monster Reborn in this particular point. You could opt to play World Legacy Succession, that is also an option, but it's unlikely that you'll always go into a Link monster, so Charge into a Dark World definitely works out a little better in this particular point. Not to mention, if you discard a Fiend, you could definitely make the most out of Dock or Calamity. As for the trap cards, we're still playing 2 copies of Last Stand. It's essentially a negate, you definitely don't want to change it. And we're also playing here 3 copies of Desperado. A really good card as well, definitely works out incredibly well disrupting your opponents. And then of course we have Fiendish Deal, we have Crooked Crown, and we also have Dancing Needle. 3 cards that are definitely very good, adds more versatility to the deck itself, and that way you could respond in different manners. Finally, we're going to be playing here 3 copies of Impermanence. Wish I had 3 copies of it, but I'm still only stuck with the 1, but there's nothing I can do about it, so if I have to in a more budget variant, you would be playing the Crackdowns. Definitely still works out for the deck anyway, so there's no need to worry about that. However, with that being said, let's move on to the extra deck. So starting off here, we have 2 copies of Max. I don't see any reason in playing 3 copies. You could be saving up more space for your extra deck to play a few more better cards, as they might be a bit more versatile. In a game, you're likely to only go into 2 copies at the most, at max, and that's the thing. This particular card, if you can't win by using 2 of these, then you're very unlikely to win if you had to go into a 3rd one as well. So honestly, only 2 copies is more than enough. Now for the versatility of this deck, we are playing here the Phoenix, the Cerberus, and also the Unicorn. They definitely just work out really well for the deck, allowing you to pop whatever you want. You could also opt to play an additional copy of Unicorn or Phoenix if you want to as well, as they're really good. And this is the It Masquerina, so you don't have to play her. You could play a 2nd copy of Phoenix, that's okay, because either way, any 2 Link 2 monsters can still definitely just go into your Avramax really easily, which is definitely quite rewarding. We are also still playing here our Anima because we are playing the Instant Fusion, which goes into our Millennium Eyes. And finally, for a bit of the Xyz monsters, with Ties of the Brethren giving you just more resources onto the field, although you can't do anything on the same turn that they were summoned, you could do something on the following turn. So here's Tornado Dragon, Baguska, we have Castel, and of course the Utopia package. Definitely well worth it for the deck and adds a lot of variety for what you could potentially go for in a toolbox for this particular extra deck. However, with that being said, I do hope you guys actually enjoyed this particular deck profile, and I hope you find this particular deck very useful, because this new build has been something that I've actually really come to enjoy a lot, because compared to the previous one, which had a lot of downsides to it, this particular version actually is a little bit more strong in terms of building up resources, maintaining the resources, disrupting, but also the consistency has reached a really high point for this deck. But thanks for joining me today. I will be doing some test hands next time, so do stay tuned for that. I hope you all have a fantastic day. I'll see you all next time.